After 15 years as a flight paramedic and emergency helicopter pilot, I chose Oakwood Estates as my sanctuary from the chaos. The brochure promised tranquility with its tree-lined streets and welcoming community. What the glossy pages failed to mention was the iron fist that ruled over this suburban paradise. I needed peace after spending my career landing helicopters in disaster zones and pulling people from the worst moments of their lives. My brother James had moved in with me while recovering from a recent surgery, and we both thought this would be the perfect place to heal. The first letter arrived exactly 3 days after I moved in. It was printed on official Homeowners Association letterhead, detailing a violation for leaving my garden hose visible on the side of the house. I had been unpacking boxes when the doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was a woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair styled in the trademark "I demand to speak to your manager" cut. She wore designer sunglasses perched on her head and clutched a clipboard like it contained launch codes for nuclear missiles. "Hello, I am Patricia Winters, president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. I noticed your garden hose is visible from the street. According to Bylaw 15, Section 4, all garden equipment must be stored out of sight." Her voice had the practiced precision of someone who enjoyed delivering bad news. No introduction, no welcome to the neighborhood, just immediate criticism. I apologized and explained I was still in the process of moving in. My response seemed to disappoint her, as if she had been looking forward to resistance. "Well, we take our community standards very seriously here. I will let it slide this once, but I expect immediate compliance moving forward." She handed me a 3-ring binder that weighed more than my flight manual. "Here is our complete rule book. I suggest you familiarize yourself with it thoroughly." The weeks that followed brought more violations. My trash cans remained at the curb 30 minutes after collection. 3 leaves from my maple tree blew onto my neighbor's lawn. My blinds were a shade of white that did not match the community-approved color palette. Each infraction came with a personal visit from Patricia, her clipboard ever present, her tone growing increasingly satisfied with each citation. At the first HOA meeting I attended, I witnessed Patricia in her element. She ruled the community room like a small-town dictator, cutting off residents mid-sentence and dismissing concerns with a wave of her hand. When an elderly couple requested permission to install a wheelchair ramp, Patricia spent 20 minutes explaining why it would disrupt the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. I sat silently, observing the defeated expressions of my neighbors. This was not the sanctuary I had imagined. What Patricia did not know was that my career had taught me to remain calm in crisis situations. I had navigated helicopters through storms and performed emergency procedures under impossible conditions. Her clipboard and bylaws did not intimidate me, but I chose not to engage, to simply follow the rules and enjoy what peace I could find. After all, what were a few petty rules compared to the life-and-death situations I had faced? Little did I know that Patricia's obsession with rules would soon collide with an actual life-or-death situation. And when that moment came, my professional training and her bureaucratic authority would face off in a way that would change our community forever. The morning began like any other Tuesday. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen blinds as I prepared coffee, enjoying the rare day off from my part-time consulting work with the Regional Emergency Medical Service. James was upstairs resting. His recovery from heart surgery had been going well, but he still tired easily and spent most mornings in bed. I had just settled at the kitchen table with the newspaper when I heard it. A thud from upstairs, followed by complete silence. My body reacted before my mind could process what was happening. 15 years of emergency response kicked in as I took the stairs 2 at a time. I found James on the bedroom floor, his body jerking in rhythmic convulsions. His lips had already taken on a bluish tint. I recognized the signs immediately: post-surgical complication, likely a blood clot that had traveled to his lungs or brain. The clock had started ticking. I positioned him on his side to maintain his airway, noticing the medication bottle that had fallen from his hand. My mind was simultaneously the trained professional and the terrified brother. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my voice shifting to the clinical tone I used during emergencies. "This is Michael Reed at 1542 Oakwood Drive. I have a 42-year-old male, post-cardiac surgery 3 weeks ago, currently having seizures with signs of hypoxia. Patient is my brother. I am a certified paramedic. Need immediate advanced life support." The dispatcher responded with appropriate urgency. "Ambulance dispatched. Estimated arrival 15 minutes due to your location." 15 minutes. Too long. I knew the statistics all too well. Brain damage could begin within 4 to 6 minutes without proper oxygenation. Every second counted. I stayed on the line while beginning basic life support measures. My hands moved through familiar motions, checking pulse, monitoring breathing, positioning his body. The clinical part of my brain was calculating survival odds with each passing second, while another part noticed how pale his skin looked against the bedroom carpet. This was my brother, not just a patient. "Dispatch, what is their current location? Can you get them here faster?" My voice remained steady, but anxiety crept in at the edges. I knew our neighborhood was at least 12 miles from the nearest hospital. The dispatcher confirmed they were moving as quickly as possible. I grabbed the emergency medical kit I kept in my closet, a habit from years in the field. Oxygen mask, basic medications, monitoring equipment. Not enough for what James needed, but enough to buy precious minutes. His seizure had stopped, but his breathing was shallow and irregular. Classic signs of a pulmonary embolism or stroke. He needed advanced intervention immediately. Through the window, I could see clouds gathering in the morning sky, their shadows moving across the perfectly maintained lawns of Oakwood Estates. The clock on the bedside table seemed to tick more loudly with each passing second. 6 minutes had already passed since I found him. My training told me what was happening inside his body, the damage that was accumulating with each moment. I heard the distant wail of sirens approaching the neighborhood, and relief washed over me. The ambulance was making good time. Perhaps they would beat the odds. I continued monitoring James, speaking to him though he remained unconscious. "Help is coming, James. Just stay with me. Stay with me." His pulse was weakening under my fingers. The clinical part of my brain noted the drop in blood pressure, the increasing difficulty in respiration. 9 minutes had passed. The sirens were closer now, but then something strange happened. They stopped getting louder. The ambulance should have been pulling up to my house by now, but the sound remained distant, hovering at the edge of the neighborhood. I placed an oxygen mask over James's face and adjusted the flow rate, my mind racing to understand the delay. Something was wrong, very wrong, and as the realization dawned on me, a cold dread settled in my stomach. The sirens had stopped moving closer because the ambulance had stopped moving. But why? The answer came as my phone rang again. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I answered immediately, one hand still monitoring James's pulse. "This is Michael Reed." "Mr. Reed, this is Paramedic Johnson with County Emergency Services." The voice sounded tense, professional, but with an undercurrent of frustration. "We are at the entrance to Oakwood Estates, but cannot proceed. There is a woman blocking the gate who refuses to let us through without proper visitor clearance." For a moment I could not process what I was hearing. It sounded absurd, impossible. "What do you mean someone is blocking you? This is an emergency vehicle responding to a life-threatening situation." "Sir, I understand. We have explained this to her. She insists we need to follow community protocols for visitor entry. She has positioned her vehicle to block access and is refusing to move it. We have requested police assistance, but they are at least 7 minutes out. 7 more minutes. Unacceptable. James did not have 7 minutes. I looked down at my brother's face, the oxygen mask fogging slightly with each shallow breath. 12 minutes had now passed since his collapse. My medical training screamed at me that we were approaching a critical threshold. I am coming down there immediately. Continue attempting entry. I adjusted the oxygen flow one last time and ran down the stairs, grabbing my car keys and medical credentials from the entryway table. Through my living room window, I could see the red and blue lights flashing at the neighborhood entrance about a quarter-mile away. The ambulance was so close, yet impossibly far for James. I jumped into my car and sped down the street, tires screeching as I took the corner too fast. When I reached the entrance, the scene was exactly as I had feared. The ambulance stood idle, lights flashing uselessly. Patricia Winters stood in front of the gate, her SUV parked sideways to block entry. Her clipboard was in hand, and she was gesturing emphatically at the paramedics who stood outside their vehicle. I slammed my car into park and approached the scene, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and rage. The paramedics looked relieved to see me. "Sir, we have been trying to explain." Patricia cut them off, turning to me with a look of administrative satisfaction. "Mr. Reed, these people claim they need immediate access to your home, but they have not followed proper visitor protocol. As you know, all visitors must register at the security office and obtain a visitor pass." I stepped closer to her, fighting to keep my voice level. "Patricia, this is an ambulance responding to a medical emergency at my house. My brother is dying. Move your vehicle immediately." She adjusted her glasses and consulted her clipboard. "The bylaws are very clear. All vehicles entering Oakwood Estates must display proper identification. Emergency or not, rules exist for a reason." The paramedic named Johnson approached, his frustration visible. "Ma'am, we have explained this is a Code 3 emergency. Every minute of delay can mean permanent damage or death for the patient." Patricia remained unmoved. "I understand emergencies happen, but if we make exceptions, where do we draw the line? Next, you will tell me fire trucks do not need to follow speed limits or that police can park wherever they please." Blood pounded in my ears as I checked my watch. 15 minutes had now passed since James collapsed. We had crossed the threshold where damage was no longer theoretical but probable. I took out my phone, making a decision that would change everything. "Patricia, I am going to ask you one more time to move your vehicle and allow these paramedics through. This is literally life or death." She clutched her clipboard tighter. "Rules are rules and no one is exempt. Not even you, Mr. Reed. The proper procedure is to call ahead and arrange for emergency access. Since you failed to do so, we must follow protocol." The absurdity of her statement might have been laughable in any other situation. The very nature of emergencies meant they could not be scheduled or arranged in advance. But Patricia lived in a world where administrative procedure trumped human necessity. I looked at the paramedics, who stood helplessly beside their fully equipped ambulance. Then I looked at Patricia, standing firm with her clipboard and rulebook. In that moment, I made a decision. If the ambulance could not reach James, I would bring something else. Something that would not be stopped by Gates or Karen with a clipboard. "Get back in your ambulance and be ready to follow once this is resolved," I told the paramedics. Then I turned to Patricia, my voice deadly calm. "You have made a choice today that may cost someone their life. I hope you can live with that." I walked back to my car, already dialing a number I had not used in months. As Patricia continued lecturing the paramedics about community standards and visitor protocols, I made the call that would bypass her authority entirely. When my former colleague picked up, I did not waste time with pleasantries. "Tom, it is Michael Reed. I need the helicopter at Oakwood Estates immediately. Life-threatening emergency, possible PE or stroke, ambulance blocked from entry. I am preparing a landing zone in my backyard." Time seemed to slow as I ended the call with Tom. The world narrowed to a series of tactical decisions and immediate actions. My training as both a paramedic and helicopter pilot converged into perfect clarity. I knew exactly what needed to happen in the next few minutes. "ETA for air evac is 7 minutes," I shouted to the paramedics as I ran back toward my house. "Meet me at 1542 Oakwood Drive when you get through." I heard Patricia calling after me, something about unauthorized aircraft and noise ordinances, but her voice faded as I focused on what mattered. 7 minutes to prepare a landing zone. 7 minutes to keep James alive. 7 minutes to do what I had trained for my entire career. I burst through my front door and took the stairs 2 at a time. James remained unconscious, his condition deteriorating despite the supplemental oxygen. His skin had taken on a gray pallor that sent ice through my veins. I checked his vitals quickly, pulse thread and irregular, respiration shallow and labored. Classic signs of system failure. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Coordinates." I sent him my address, adding, "Backyard clear, 30x30 space, no overhead wires, neighbors on alert ASAP." I had 7 minutes to create a safe landing zone in my backyard and alert the neighbors to stay inside. The helicopter's rotor wash would send lawn furniture, garden decorations, and anything not secured flying like projectiles. I ran through the house, grabbing the emergency strobe lights I kept from my flying days, then headed to the backyard. My mind calculated distances and clearances as I surveyed the space. The yard was approximately 40 feet wide by 50 feet deep. The large oak tree on the right would need to be avoided, but there was sufficient clearance if they approached from the east. I placed the strobes in a triangle pattern to mark the landing zone, then quickly dragged the patio furniture into the garage. I ran to the houses on either side. My neighbors answered their doors with confused expressions that quickly turned to shock as I explained the situation. "Emergency helicopter landing in my backyard in 5 minutes. Stay inside, away from windows, keep children and pets indoors." They nodded, wide-eyed but understanding. 4 minutes left. I returned to James, checking his vitals again and adjusting his position to maximize blood flow to his brain. His skin felt cool to the touch, his pulse increasingly difficult to locate. The oxygen tank gauge showed half empty. Not enough time, not enough resources, but help was coming. From above, not by road. Through the open bedroom window, I could hear Patricia's voice carrying from the front of the neighborhood. She was still arguing with the paramedics, her tone indignant and authoritative. In any other circumstance, I might have felt anger, but now I felt only focused determination. She had become irrelevant to the solution. 3 minutes. I sent another text to Tom, patient declining rapidly, suspected massive PE, bring full cardiac support. 2 minutes. I heard shouting from outside. Neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, pointing skyward. The distinctive whump-whump-whump of rotor blades approached from the distance. I felt it before I heard it, the vibration that traveled through the ground and up through the house, a sensation familiar from countless missions. 1 minute. I placed a pillow under James's head and squeezed his hand. "Help is almost here, just hold on." Whether he could hear me or not, I needed to say it. The sound grew louder, drowning out all other noise. The helicopter appeared over the tree line, its massive frame momentarily blocking the sun as it approached. I had been the pilot on countless missions like this one, but never had I been on this side, the one waiting, hopping, praying for the miracle from above. From my bedroom window, I could see Patricia standing in the middle of the street, her clipboard fallen forgotten at her feet as she stared upward, mouth open in disbelief. Several neighbors had gathered despite my warnings, their phones raised to record the unprecedented event unfolding in their carefully regulated community. The helicopter hovered, the pilot scanning the landing zone I had prepared. I recognized Tom's precise movements as he evaluated the approach. The massive vehicle began its descent, wind from the rotors bending trees and sending Patricia's carefully arranged flower pots tumbling across lawns. The medical team would be aboard, ready to deploy the moment they touched down. They would have everything James needed: advanced cardiac support, anticoagulants, emergency surgical capabilities if necessary. Everything that had been sitting uselessly in the ambulance at the gate. As the helicopter lowered into position, the house trembled around me. I looked down at James, squeezing his hand once more. They are here. We beat her. We beat the rules. And for the first time since finding him collapsed, I allowed myself to hope. The helicopter descended toward my backyard with surgical precision, its massive rotors creating a localized windstorm that transformed the manicured landscape of Oakwood Estates. Lawn ornaments took flight, patio umbrellas from nearby homes collapsed and tumbled across perfectly trimmed grass, and the carefully arranged flower beds that had earned Patricia so many community awards were stripped bare, petals swirling in colorful vortices. I watched from the bedroom window as the aircraft hovered momentarily, the pilot making final adjustments to align with the strobes I had placed. The noise was deafening, a physical pressure against my eardrums that drowned out everything else. The helicopter settled gently onto my lawn, rotors still spinning in hot standby mode, ready for immediate departure once James was aboard. The side door slid open before the skids fully touched the ground. 3 figures in flight suits jumped out, crouching beneath the still spinning blades, medical gear in hand. I recognized the efficient movements of an expert trauma team, the same choreographed urgency I had participated in hundreds of times from the other side. They ran toward my back door, heads bowed against the rotor wash. I raced downstairs to let them in, nearly colliding with the team leader in the doorway. It was Sarah Miller, a flight nurse I had worked with for 5 years before moving to Oakwood Estates. Her face registered momentary surprise at seeing me, then immediately shifted to professional focus. "Michael, where is the patient?" she had to shout over the noise of the helicopter. "Upstairs bedroom, first door on the right. Suspected pulmonary embolism following cardiac surgery 3 weeks ago. Seizure, followed by respiratory distress. Unconscious approximately 20 minutes now." I delivered the information in the clipped, precise language of emergency medicine as I led them up the stairs. The team moved with practiced efficiency, immediately assessing James and connecting him to portable monitoring equipment. The cardiac monitor confirmed my fears: dangerous arrhythmia, oxygen saturation critically low despite the supplemental oxygen I had provided. The third team member, a paramedic I did not recognize, prepared medications while Sarah and the doctor established an IV line. "We need to move him now," the doctor said after a 30-second assessment. "Get the stretcher up here." While they worked, I went to the window, watching as a crowd gathered at a safe distance from the helicopter. Neighbors stood in small clusters, some still in bathrobes or pajamas, staring in disbelief at the scene unfolding in their quiet community. And there, standing at the front of the crowd, was Patricia Winters, her face frozen in an expression that mingled shock, outrage, and the dawning realization that her authority had been completely circumvented. The paramedics from the ambulance had finally made it through the gate and were now running toward my house, their equipment bouncing against their sides. Too late for the initial response, but they could assist with the transfer. I saw Patricia attempt to intercept them, clipboard once again in hand, but they rushed past her without acknowledgement. Inside, the team had James stabilized enough for transport. They moved him carefully onto the stretcher, a tangled web of IV lines, monitor leads, and oxygen tubing connecting him to the portable life support equipment. His face was covered with an oxygen mask, but beneath it, I could see his color had improved slightly. The medications were working, buying precious time. "Michael, are you coming with us?" Sarah asked as they secured the straps on the stretcher. As his next of kin, I had the right to accompany him. "Yes," I replied without hesitation. James had no one else. We moved quickly down the stairs, the team carrying the stretcher with practiced ease despite the awkward angles of the staircase. Outside, the wind from the rotors hit us like a physical wall as we emerged from the house. The ground paramedics met us halfway across the yard, immediately assisting with the transfer. The noise was too great for conversation now. Communication reduced to hand signals and nods as we approached the helicopter. The team loaded James through the side door, securing the stretcher to the floor mounts inside. I climbed in after them, ducking instinctively beneath the blades though they were well above head height. As I settled into the jump seat, I looked out the open door one last time. The entire neighborhood had gathered now, a ring of stunned faces surrounding my property at a safe distance. Patricia stood at the front, her hair whipping wildly in the artificial wind, her clipboard clutched uselessly against her chest. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and I saw something I had never expected to see in her expression: uncertainty. The door slid closed, sealing us in the relative quiet of the cabin. The pilot, Tom, my former colleague, turned briefly from the controls to give me a nod of recognition before focusing on the instruments. The engine pitch changed, and the helicopter lifted smoothly from my backyard, rising above the trees, above the neighborhood, above Patricia and her rules and her clipboard. As we banked toward the hospital, I watched Oakwood Estates shrink beneath us. From above, it looked exactly as it had in the brochure, perfect and peaceful, the individual dramas invisible from this height. But I knew something had fundamentally changed. As the helicopter accelerated forward, I turned my attention to James, reaching for his hand among the medical equipment. His fingers twitched slightly in response, the first sign of consciousness since his collapse. We had escaped the blockade. Now we just had to outrun time. The hospital waiting room fell silent as I finished giving the medical team all the information they needed about James. 27 minutes from collapse to arrival at the trauma center. The doctor nodded grimly. We all knew those 27 minutes would determine everything that followed. As they wheeled James away, I finally allowed the adrenaline to subside, collapsing into an uncomfortable plastic chair as the events of the morning caught up with me. My phone buzzed continuously with messages from neighbors. News travels fast in a community where the most exciting previous event had been a debate over permissible shades of beige for exterior paint. I scrolled through dozens of texts, ranging from concerned inquiries about James to excited descriptions of the helicopter landing. Several included videos of the rescue, captured from various angles around the neighborhood. One message caught my attention from Mark Wilson, a retired doctor who lived 3 doors down. Saw everything. Patricia tried to write you up for unauthorized aircraft landing and destruction of common area landscaping. Several of us intervened. Community meeting called for 7 p.m. tonight. Hope your brother is okay. I closed my eyes, too exhausted to feel anger. Of course, Patricia would try to reassert control through bureaucracy. It was the only tool she knew how to use. 4 hours later, the surgical team emerged with news. The helicopter evacuation had made all the difference. James had indeed suffered a massive pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that had traveled to his lungs. 10 more minutes without intervention would have resulted in permanent brain damage or death. The procedure to remove the clot had been successful. James would recover. When I returned to Oakwood Estates that evening, my front door was plastered with violation notices. Unauthorized aircraft landing, destruction of community property, noise ordinance violation, failure to submit landscaping changes for approval. Each carried Patricia's signature and threats of fines totaling over $20,000. Neighbors stopped by continuously, bringing food, offering support, and sharing their own stories of encounters with Patricia's rigid enforcement. Mark Wilson brought copies of the HOA bylaws, pointing out sections that explicitly exempted emergency services from standard protocols. Ashley and David, from across the street, shared video they had captured of Patricia blocking the ambulance, clear evidence of her actions. "She has gone too far this time," Ashley said, her voice trembling with anger. "This was not about paint colors or fence heights. This was about someone's life." As 7 o'clock approached, I walked to the community center, violation notices in hand. The parking lot was full. It seemed every resident of Oakwood Estates had come. Inside, additional chairs had been brought in to accommodate the crowd. The tension was palpable, a physical presence in the room. Patricia sat at the front table with the other HOA board members, her posture rigid, clipboard centered precisely before her. She pointedly avoided looking in my direction as I took a seat in the back row. A temporary chair, Walter from the Finance Committee, called the meeting to order. "Due to the unusual circumstances today, we have called this emergency meeting to address concerns raised by community members," Walter began, his discomfort evident in his shifting gaze. Patricia immediately reached for the microphone. "Before we begin, I want to clarify that while emergencies are unfortunate, they do not exempt residents from following established community guidelines. Mr. Reed's actions today resulted in significant damage to community property and violated numerous bylaws." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Walter awkwardly reclaimed the microphone. "Actually, Patricia, the first agenda item is to discuss your actions at the front gate this morning." The room fell silent as Walter invited me to speak. I walked to the front, feeling the eyes of every resident upon me. I placed my phone on the podium and played the video Ashley had shared with me, clear footage of Patricia blocking the ambulance, the paramedics pleading with her, her refusal to move. "My brother survived today despite these actions, not because of them," I said when the video ended. "The helicopter evacuation that saved his life was necessary only because emergency medical services were prevented from reaching him through normal means." One by one, residents came forward. The elderly couple who had been denied their wheelchair ramp, families who had been fined for leaving toys in their yards after their children were diagnosed with serious illnesses, a single mother who had nearly lost her home because she could not immediately replace storm-damaged siding with approved materials. Patricia's face remained impassive throughout, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her clipboard. When finally given a chance to respond, she stood stiffly. Rules exist for a reason, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. Without structure, without guidelines, communities fall into chaos. What happened today was unfortunate, but procedures must be followed, even in emergencies. The vote that followed was not even close. When Walter announced the results, 232 to 8 for removal of Patricia from the HOA presidency and board, a spontaneous applause broke out. As Patricia was escorted out, her clipboard still clutched to her chest, I felt no satisfaction, only relief that no one else would face what James had endured. The community immediately voted to implement new emergency protocols, ensuring that medical, fire, and police services would always have immediate access to the neighborhood. As the meeting concluded, neighbors lingered, introducing themselves to one another, many meeting for the first time despite living side by side for years. Something had broken in Oakwood Estates that day, but something stronger was being built in its place. 3 weeks after the helicopter landing, Oakwood Estates held its regular monthly HOA meeting. The community center looked different somehow, the same beige walls and practical furniture, but the atmosphere had transformed. Where previous meetings had featured Patricia at the front, controlling every aspect of the discussion, tonight residents gathered in small groups, conversing freely before the meeting began. James had recovered enough to attend with me, moving slowly but steadily with a cane. As we entered, conversations paused momentarily as neighbors approached to introduce themselves, shake his hand, and express their relief at his recovery. Many brought cards or small gifts. The sense of genuine community felt foreign after months of experiencing Oakwood Estates as merely a collection of rules and regulations. The new HOA president, Alina Matthews, a retired school principal with a reputation for fairness, called the meeting to order. Unlike Patricia's rigid adherence to procedure, Alina began by inviting community announcements and celebrations. Residents shared news of births, graduations, achievements, and milestones, human connections that had never found space in Patricia's agenda. When the regular business concluded, Alina addressed the changes implemented since the emergency. The new protocols for emergency services have been filed with the county. All first responders now have keycard access to our gates. Additionally, we have created an emergency response committee to ensure nothing like what happened 3 weeks ago ever occurs again. The meeting was nearly over when the back door opened. Patricia Winters entered, her familiar clipboard in hand. The room fell silent as she made her way to the front, her expression unreadable. Alina acknowledged her with a polite nod. Patricia has requested a few minutes to address the community. As is the right of all residents, she will be given the floor. Patricia stood at the podium, surveying the room. I expected defensiveness or justification. What came instead surprised everyone. For 15 years, I have served as president of this association. I believed structure and rules were what made a community valuable. 3 weeks ago, those beliefs led me to make a decision that nearly cost someone their life. Her voice faltered slightly, the first crack in her composure I had ever witnessed. She placed her clipboard on the podium, the same clipboard that had been her weapon and shield for so long. I was wrong, not just about emergency protocols, but about what makes a community worth living in. It is not uniformity or conformity or perfect lawns. It is how we care for each other when it matters most. She turned to face James and me directly. I offer no excuses for my actions. What I did was indefensible. I have submitted my resignation from all community committees. The violation notices issued to Mr. Reed have been rescinded, and I wish to say, publicly, that I am deeply sorry for the harm I caused. The silence that followed was profound. No one had expected this from Patricia Winters. After a moment, James slowly stood, leaning on his cane for support. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "What matters now is that we build something better together." Patricia nodded once, left her clipboard on the podium, and quietly exited the room. The symbolic weight of the abandoned clipboard was lost on no one. In the months that followed, Oakwood Estates underwent a transformation more significant than any landscaping project or color scheme update. The rigid enforcement of rules gave way to a balance of standards and compassion. The Emergency Response Committee, which I eventually joined, worked with local first responders to create training sessions for residents on basic life support and disaster preparedness. My backyard, where the helicopter had landed, became the site of the community's first collective project, a garden where neighbors gathered to plant flowers and vegetables together. The area where Patricia's prized roses had once grown now featured a small plaque that read simply, "Life before rules." 6 months after the incident, I received a letter from the Regional Emergency Medical Service. They had reviewed the events at Oakwood Estates and were implementing new protocols for gated communities across the county. What had happened to James would serve to protect others in the future. On warm evenings, neighbors now gathered on porches and in yards, sharing stories and building the connections that had been discouraged under Patricia's leadership. Children played on lawns without fear of violation notices. The retired doctor offered free blood pressure checks at the community center. The single mother started a support group for parents facing medical challenges. As for James and me, we remained in Oakwood Estates, though my brother now joked that he preferred conventional ambulance service for any future emergencies. The helicopter landing had become neighborhood legend, retold at barbecues and community events with increasing embellishment. Sometimes I spot Patricia walking through the neighborhood alone, without her clipboard. She nods politely when our paths cross but keeps her distance. The last I heard, she had joined a community outreach program at the local hospital, learning, perhaps for the first time, that there are things in life more important than rules on paper. What began as a power struggle over emergency access had revealed a fundamental truth. Communities are not built on regulations and restrictions, but on how people respond when it truly matters. In the most unexpected way, a medical emergency had healed more than just my brother. It had healed Oakwood Estates itself.